Jefferson County holds a heavy place in history with John's Brown raid on Harpers Ferry and the subsequent trial held in Charlestown. But before he came to Harpers Ferry, John Brown took his mission of freedom to Kansas. Coming this May to the Shepherdstown Opera House follows the story of George and Kitty Clark and asks the question, when conflict comes to your door, what do you do? For Her TV, I'm Christian Lopez. Today, I'm joined by some of the cast of the town-run theater company and artistic director, Joe Yates. Could each of you introduce yourselves and your roles in the show?
I'm Joe Yates. I'm the artistic director of Town Run Theater Company. I played George in the show, a farmer who sought a better life in Kansas and ran into a bit of trouble.
I'm Homer Speaker. I play Josiah Nichols in the show. I also am a farmer. I'm there with my wife, Louisa, and family in Kansas, next door neighbors to George and Kitty. And our stories come together and then separate, for lack of a better term.
That's one way to put it.
I'm Richard Yates. I play Edwin Redpath. They call him Red, though. He is a border ruffian from Missouri, and he is there mostly just causing trouble and drinking a lot of whiskey and killing whoever he can who disagrees. So,
I'm Sarah Ward. I play Hannah Rose Allen, and I'm an abolitionist from Boston who travels to Kansas to make it a free state.
Awesome.
In hopes of making it.
Awesome. So I just want to say thank you guys for taking time out of y'all's day to, come here and do this interview.
Absolutely.
So Bleeding Kansas follows the couple George and Kitty Clark.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us a little more about the couple and what they go through in the show?
Well, George and Kitty lived in Indiana, and they decided to go to Kansas for, as George puts it in the play, opportunities. They sought a life where they could stake out a claim of land, farm it, raise a family, and live a nice, peaceful life.
Awesome.
And unfortunately, at the time, Kansas was going through becoming a state, and the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854 stipulated that the people of Kansas would vote whether or not Kansas would become free or slave. Mm. And so that was going on when Kitty and George arrived, even though they really had no interest in whether or not Kansas was going to be a slave state or a free state. They just wanted a better life. They just wanted to live and farm and raise their family. So they kind of stepped into it.
Yeah.
But
that's awesome. Can you explain what this historical event, Bleeding Kansas, was for any viewers who, don't know that are out there watching this?
Sure. You want to take that?
Well, this event takes place during the time when Kansas was in the process of determining whether it would be a free state or a slave state. And as Joe mentioned, that would happen through an election. The people would decide whether Kansas would be a free state or a slave state. And this play focuses on these families and on this woman who comes from Boston to spread the abolitionist ways of in Kansas. But it focuses on these families, one, Josiah, who's from Missouri, which is a pro-slavery state, George and Kitty, who are free soilers. They are not pro-slavery, anti-slavery. They just want to be left alone. But it focuses on the tension in Kansas between these families who pro-slavery, free soil, but Kansas trying to become slave state or free state, or deciding to become slave state or free state. And the tension, the violence, friendship, loss of friendship. What will happen? What will you do when somebody comes knocking on your door to determine where do you stand on things? How are you going to vote? So it creates that tension, and the play explores how people react to that tension, what happens, the violence, friendships. from there.
And the reason we're doing the play is because 1855 was 6 years before the beginning of the Civil War. You mentioned John Brown's raid on Harpers Ferry, which was 1858-59, and where he was hung in Charlestown. Everything was leading up to the Civil War, which mirrors what was going on in the United States of America today, because we are as divided now as a country as they were in 1860. And so the reason we're doing this play is to basically hold up a mirror to America and say, this is where we were. This is what happened. Do we really want to do this? Do we really want to live through that again?
Yeah.
Or should we maybe start thinking about getting along with each other a little bit?
And I think that's one of the most important aspects of a viewer's perspective, going into watching this play and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So definitely, have we learned anything from history?
Yeah. So, Joe, I read that this is actually your third installment in your historical dramas. Can you tell me about the other two that you have done previously?
Well, we've done a play called The Anvil, which is the trial of John Brown, many times. The first time I did that play was, 25, 30 years ago. And that actually is a reenactment of John Brown's trial in Charlestown.
Oh, wow.
And we've done that numerous times in the actual courthouse where he was tried.
Wow.
So it's pretty cool to be able to step into those shoes. Homer has done it with me a number of times, and Richard has done it as well a number of times.
Awesome.
And it's one of my absolute favorite plays, because to crawl into the bones of John Brown as an actor is a pretty exciting opportunity.
Yeah.
And it's really cool because we can gather members of the community who are not actors and playing parts in the play, because that's exactly what happened. People were pulled off the streets who were witness to this to testify, and the play itself is his trial. So it's really cool. And it's a wonderful piece of theater. To do it in the actual room where he was tried is pretty awesome. That's number one. Number two is a play called The Rivalry, which was written by Norman Corwin. And that play reenacts basically the Lincoln-Douglas debates of 1858, which also led into the Civil War. It basically took Abraham Lincoln from a guy that nobody knew anything about and made him nationally known because they had just invented the telegraph. And so the Lincoln-Douglas debates were basically broadcast like it was on CNN today. So that elevated him. He lost the election to Stephen Douglas, but it elevated him. And had it not occurred, he probably would not have been elected president in 1860. So that was pretty important. But the debates between Lincoln and Douglas centered on the question of slavery. Obviously, that's what was going on in the country as a whole, and that was what was dividing the country as a whole. And the reason that we want to do that, as I said, is to basically reiterate that, we need to learn as a country from our history. We need to recognize where we were in 1858 and learn from it and understand that the path that we're on is a dangerous one. The more people died in the Civil War more Americans died in the Civil War than in any other war. And that's pretty important stuff. So that's why we're doing it. This is Bleeding Kansas was a play that I read, and I was just shocked at how well it fit into the timeline of doing The Anvil, The Rivalry, and now Bleeding Kansas. It's pretty exciting for me as an artist to present these things that all kind of tie together nicely, and at the same time, as I said, hold a mirror up to our country and say, hey, pay attention, folks.
Yeah. And speaking of tying together things nicely, I love how the past work that you have done all kind of ties into
Yeah.
what you're doing with Bleeding Kansas and stuff like that.
It's pretty exciting as
Yeah.
an artist. It's very exciting to find material that does that.
Yeah.
It's pretty rare actually.
Yeah.
So and we've gotten a lot of support in this area from people who are interested in that, not only interested in history but also recognizing the importance of it, which is critical.
Yeah.
So
Have all of you guys grown up like around the Jefferson County area? Or are you guys all from around here?
where are you from, Sarah?
Charlestown, born and
Okay.
raised my whole life.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Pretty close to where John Brown was
Brown,
hung, right?
yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, with John Brown being one of the most prominent figures in the Civil War, this is a question for all of you guys. Living in this area, how has this legacy affected you all?
Well, I'll be honest. It's kind of beat into your head
Yeah.
when you grow up around here. Just to be as honest as I possibly can be. I mean, because I'm actually born and raised in Shepherdstown.
Yeah.
So we grow up and we're almost always, every year, we're talking about John Brown around the same time. And
When we do the anvil.
usually about that time, actually. But we do talk about, and like growing up, you hear all about it. And then it's funny because when I went to WVU for college, half the people there don't know who he is.
Yeah.
And it's a little sobering in that way. But then, because I met a couple people who are from Kansas, and they talked about him. And you forget just how widespread his actual impact was.
Yeah.
Partially because, you go further north and you're like, oh, well, they don't really talk about him like we do. You go further south, they talk about guys like William Tecumseh Sherman more than, and definitely a lot of Robert E. Lee, but John Brown kind of gets lost a little bit when you leave this area. And then, but then you talk about him with people from Kansas, and then you see just how impactful he is. And so for me, it's his legacy impacts me because I also have a history degree, so it's fun to look at him and think, okay, so there's different ways to go about the same thing. And whether they're right or wrong, we always question that, is how I look at it. And so for me, it's, can we learn from, do we have to go that violent sometimes like John Brown did? Is there an extreme, or is there a little bit of a different way to go about things? And that's what I always take away from it,
That's awesome.
mostly.
Do any of you guys want to add on to that?
I would just say that John Brown did have an enormous impact on the state of Kansas.
Yeah.
There's a John Brown College. There's a
I did not even know that. Wow.
There's lots of stuff that's named after him,
Yeah.
and his impact. I mean, the guy was there for a few weeks.
Yeah.
And it was a very, very impactful thing. Now, one of the I don't want to turn this into a John Brown thing, but one of the questions that you always asked when you're dealing with a play that he's involved with is whether or not he was a hero or a villain. And what we try to do as artists is not answer that question, because it's not up to us to decide that. It's up to the audience to decide that for themselves. And so that's a really important aspect of what we do, is just present him as a human being and let them decide, oh, he was an SOB, or oh, he was the second coming, who knows?
Yeah. So this is another question for primarily all of you guys. So in the cast, what has it been like bringing this show to life?
Go
Go ahead, Sarah.
Well, this is my first experience ever being in a play and acting.
Really?
And yeah, Joe had asked me to do it, and something in me was like, this is a chance to step out of my comfort zone and try something new. And it's been really cool. I feel like it's been a time of reflection on myself, but also, acting it's just cool being a part of everybody who has experience with this. So they've been very supportive in it. And
the great part about bringing somebody like Sarah into the group is her honesty and she doesn't approach it like a lot of people do. Like, you talk to somebody about being in a play and they're like, oh, great, I love to get attention. I love to have people applaud me and all of that crap. And she approaches it from a completely honest and human perspective, which is exactly what we as a company strive for, and so having her part of the company is an enormous benefit. I've been doing theater since I was 10 years old, and I learned from her watching how she absorbs and deals with not only direction but also just the life that she brings to the character is really enlightening for me as an artist. And so I just really appreciate the approach that is honest and true.
Right.
And of course, Richard had no choice. So
That is true.
But we are the town-run theater company.
yes.
And so part of the town-run theater company, as Joe said, is getting people together who approach this endeavor in a certain fashion.
Yeah, absolutely.
And one of the things about preparing for a show with this group, especially in the Anvil and in the rivalry, is the process. And Joe and I have known each other a long time, collaborated for a long time. Emily Wonger, who's in the show, who is not here, known her for a while and collaborated with her on some other things. But the process of getting, Sarah never been in a show, bringing her in and watching her, as Joe says, just blossom.
That's awesome.
And get into this, and it's like, wow, and Richard. But the evolution of these people come together, they read this script, they sit around a table for a table reading, they read this script, and then all of a sudden this magic starts to happen.
Yeah.
And then, it's just really, really something to be a part of.
That's awesome. And
I always look at it as, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
You're fine.
I always think it's fun because I'm sitting back in rehearsal with the scenes where I'm not involved. And I'm just reading along.
Yeah.
And then I look up from the script and I'm watching Homer, Emily, and Sarah work on a scene together. And I just stop and I completely forget that I'm supposed to be reading the lines because I'm mesmerized by how good they all are. It's really fun to watch people who are, even if they aren't like trained actors, to watch them kind of disappear from the people who I know one-on-one. I mean, I could talk for hours about him because he's done this forever, but I've seen my father disappear several times into a character, and it's not really, it's a little unsettling actually when it's him, but to see them disappear into characters like, I've known Emily my entire life as well, and she's a completely different person when she's playing Kitty in this show, and it's incredible to witness them go from laughing, joking around, and then all of a sudden we're in this really serious scene, and it's incredible. And there's something really, really awesome about it, to be honest with you.
And it starts with honesty. It starts with portraying real human beings. No matter what part you're playing, that's what you do. That's the approach. And when you have that as your approach, you can play virtually any part. We draw on our own experiences as actors, so it's a little tricky. But because when I did a play at Shepherd, and I played a guy who beat his wife, and I've never beat my wife, so I didn't have anything to draw upon in that regard. But I have had some unfortunate experiences in my life, so you draw upon those and bring that out of you. As long as you're being honest, then you can play any part. It's really amazing, and I just appreciate everyone in the group very, very, very much.
That's awesome. And I think drawing back upon, watching, all of you guys blossom into y'all's characters and stuff like that, I think what a lot of people, miss and a lot of people don't really understand is that before the show even comes and, brings the community together, it's already brought together, it's already bringing people together beforehand whenever it comes to, producing the show and like learning the lines and stuff like that, and bringing a certain group of people together, and
Absolutely.
it's already
And that's a process that takes months too. So it's, and we've become pretty good friends.
that's awesome. Finally, where can people find more information about the Town Run Theater Company?
Well, you can go to operahouselive.com. And we have a section of their website that's dedicated to us. The show information is on there. You can reserve tickets on there, and you can learn a little bit about the show itself. There's profiles of us on there as well. But that's probably the best source of information. We've had a couple of articles in some of the local papers as well. But Opera House Live is a good source.
That's awesome. So, thank you all for joining me so much. I really appreciate it. Like I said in the beginning, thank you all for taking time out of y'all's day to be here and, do this interview with me. Bleeding Kansas will be presented at the Shepherdstown Opera House on May 16th, 17th, 18th, 23rd, 24th, and 25th. All performances are at 7 p.m., except for Sundays, which are at 3 p.m. The May 16th performance only is pay what you will. For all other performances, tickets are $20 advance, purchase $25 at the door. Discounted pricing is available for seniors and students. Seating is limited in the Shepherdstown Opera House, so advance purchase is encouraged. Tickets and additional information are available at operahouselive.com. For Her TV, I'm Christian Lopez. Thank you all so much for joining me today.
You're welcome.